years, Mick has led off, and today he said, for the new year, Ben, you lead off. So I'm leading off. So I'm Ben Jarofsky from the Chicago Reader, WCPT Radio, and that man on the left, thank you. That man on the left is Mick Dumke from ProPublica. Although, that's right. And before that, the Chicago Sun-Times, and before that, the Reader, which is where we all started. Anyway, so show number 1, 2018, on my left, on my right, Kelly Cassidy, Susana Mendoza. I'm always on the left, but today there's some people on my left here today. And Candace Gingrich, so we have a heck of a lineup here, huh, Mick?
That's right. We do. I guess I should talk into the mic. Thanks for all of you guys for coming out. It's cold out there. Tim did his best to get everybody riled up. That's what he does. And we've been doing this for 4 years, did you say, Ben? For 4 years, we've been telling Tim to keep it short, and for 4 years, he said he will. Here we are. Anyway, we're moving on. All right, guys, we got a lot we want to talk about, but one of the things we like to do on this show is to find out a little bit about who you are before we pick your brains and pick you apart and argue up here. So, Candace, you want to tell us a little bit, how did you get drawn into political activism? We understand you have a relative who might have been involved in politics before.
Yes, my wife. That's not who you meant?
We met her too.
Yeah.
By the way, in all of our correspondence for setting this up, she referred to you as her trophy spouse. So, just putting that out there. I said, what's Candace's title? I said trophy spouse. All right.
Okay.
It was funnier when you said it than me. Funnier when you said it.
It was really funny on the email.
Most things are. So, anyhow, so my brother is Newt. Okay, next question. And which wasn't a thing for a very long time until Newt became Speaker of the House. Speaker of the House. I had to repeat that. And soon America found out that Newt, the conservative Republican leader of the Republican Revolution, had a sister who was a lesbian. And this was, 1994, and that was still kind of controversial, I guess. And so reporters came and, wanted to interview the family, interview me. I was asked at point blank, are you gay? I said, yes, I am. And that was kind of it. The reporter was an Associated Press reporter. So within 24 hours, the whole world knew that the Speaker of the House had a sister who was a lesbian. But I think what a lot of people didn't realize was that, simply being an avowed queer person in 1994 didn't automatically mean that you were doing anything about it. And I wasn't, because I was out at work, I was out to my family, I didn't know at the time that I had a reason to be fighting for anything. And after a few of the articles came out, Elizabeth Birch at the Human Rights Campaign had recently come on as executive director, and she's like, you have a kind of unique story that people might benefit from hearing, and come down to our conference, go lobby, see what you think. And that kind of was it. I found out that I was okay at public speaking. It took a while to feel comfortable with it, but I was okay at it. I was good at one-liners. And they asked me to come and be part of the Coming Out Project, the whole idea that people who know someone who's LGBTQ are more likely to understand the discrimination, understand why they need to support changes. And so I joined the Coming Out Project as a spokesperson. It's 22 years later, 23 now, and they haven't found a way to get rid of me yet. So I today am running the internship program at HRC.
All right, thanks.
And Susana Mendoza, this is your first visit to the stage. Seems like we've had this conversation a million times because you're always on my radio show. But why don't you introduce yourself to the folks here, and that's your mic.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. Well, I'm super excited to get to start the new year here. I've been here before, but it's truthfully been a very, very long time. But I've always thought the Hideout is one of the coolest places in the entire city. So very happy to be part of your show. Usually, some of you might get to hear me go back and forth with this guy on his show, and I think it's so cool because, do you guys ever see The Jerk? How many people? I'm not referring to him, but not like, do you think he's a jerk? But have you seen the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin? Yes?
Yes.
So you know that one scene where he's in the phone booth and he goes through the white pages and he sees his name and he's like, I'm somebody, right? That's how I feel when I'm on his show because they have, Dennis goes, the Mendoza report with like music, and I feel like I'm official now because I know, and don't give it to her, man. Don't give it, no. So I feel like very special because I have my own intro. So
Yeah,
that's pretty
thanks,
freaking
Susanna.
We'll work on it.
That is
The
very
next
cool.
time I'm on the show, I want music too.
Yeah, no, it's like really cool. It's like the Mendoza report. I can't do it right, but it makes me laugh every time.
Mendoza
Yeah.
report.
But I've been your comptroller now for a year. It feels like 10. But thank you for those of you who voted for me. I appreciate it very much. And prior to that, I was the city clerk in the city of Chicago. So for those of you who don't have to wait in line for 3 to 4 hours anymore to get your city sticker, I hope that's still the case now that I'm not the city clerk anymore. It should be a 5-minute wait at most now. But those were some of the initiatives that I took on when I became city clerk, was trying to get rid of these 3 to 4 hour long waits and, try to run government more efficiently at lower taxpayer cost, right? All good stuff. And you can do these things. And prior to that, I was a state rep for 10 years. So Kelly and I think, understand how the process works. The governor has yet to figure it out. But it has been very helpful in my role. I know, geez Louise. It has been very helpful to me to have been a former legislator for as long as I was in my role as comptroller. I understand the importance of the independence that should exist with each branch, right? The legislative, the judicial, and the executive. This is all stuff that the governor still has to learn, by the way. And I also understand how they do great things when they work together, right? When it's appropriate. And so I think it's been for me, it's been an incredible challenge to be the controller in the most horrific fiscal crisis time in the history of the state of Illinois. But it's also been the most exciting and rewarding in terms of knowing that we're really making a difference, and I'm doing the best I can, and I think I'm being very effective at helping to be the strongest line of defense between people and Bruce Rauner. So that's what I've been up to these days.
And Kelly Cassidy.
So I have this huge gift. I get to represent, we heard all about what happens in the 14th district, apparently. We refer to my neighborhood as the People's Republic of Rogers Park. I brag on my constituents. I say, and when we're down in Springfield, after hours, we do spend time together and hang out and talk. And I talk about, sometimes we share the kinds of things that constituents come to us with, and I inevitably will get a reaction. You get letters like that? You get called, that's kind of deep. I have the most thoughtful, informed, and demanding in all the right ways constituents, and it's the most fun in the world to represent the district that I do, and it allows this job to be a real blessing, frankly. So I love getting to, you say I say whatever I want because my constituents demand it, and it's kind of awesome. So I'm very, very lucky, and I'm glad to be here today, and really getting to be one of the people that gets to, throw the BS flag as part of my job.
What are you talking about? What have you heard from your district? What from your constituents? What kind of a letter or what?
It can be some super deep in the weeds policy issue around transportation. Why are we funding it this way instead of the way they do it in this remote country somewhere? And then we look into it. I don't know. That's a good question. We should be looking at it that way. But people really come to us with these really, they're spending time looking at stuff that most folks don't. And, whether it's, I talk about the guy that came because he spent a penny more on his taco because somebody mistaxed the small business in the community, and we figured that out and got to pay their money back. But that guy was going to deal with that penny. It wasn't that he wanted his penny back. He just knew something had been done wrong. So it's they're fun people, and I'm having trouble with my mic, but they're awesome.
All right. Well, we have a whole list of issues, sort of broad issues we're going to get into before we get into the specifics and before we open it up. But I think number one issue we have, and so I'm going to start with Susana on this because I always ask her this. or I haven't asked her in a while, but I've done many times. And why aren't there more women in politics, particularly running at the head of the ticket? You run statewide. I wanted you to run for governor. You didn't listen to me. Why aren't there more? And are you encouraged by where we're heading, sort of as a society, that there will be more in the coming years?
Thank you for the question. All right, no, so listen, there aren't enough women in politics, period, right? So it's not even just obviously at the head of the party, although at the head, we need to see that happen. I think a lot of it has to do with timing, honestly. A lot of it right now under this climate, you have to look at the race as a whole, right? So I think there were women who looked at the race and then they thought, you know, given the financials that have to be required to run against, not just normally, right? Because the financials are up to a certain point. But when you think about the fact that the person that you'd be running against in the general is a self-funded billionaire, who actually has additional friends that love to waste their money by throwing it at him as well, in the millions and millions of dollars, right? So it's not your normal scenario where you just need a lot of money to run for office. And even in a normal scenario, raising that type of money to run for a statewide office is not an easy thing to do. And I can tell you because I had to do it when I ran for comptroller. I mean, here's a race that most people had never even heard about. Forget the race, the position itself. I mean, if you remember, any of you remember my commercial where I'm like, hi, I'm Susana Mendoza. Do you know what a comptroller is? And most people don't even know. They say, comptroller is a controller. Like, what does it do? We had to do a commercial to even introduce the office to people because our polling showed that no one knew what the comptroller was or who that person was or what you did. And I felt that when you think about the fact that my opponent spent $10 million for a comptroller's race, okay? Put that in perspective. Like, never in the history of the state of Illinois had both candidates raised more than $3 million collectively, right, for primary and general races. I raised, with caps in place, mind you, which is different than it used to be, let's say, even 5 years ago. Now there's caps in place where maximum you can get before the caps are blown is about $5,400. So I raised over $2 million. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. No one has ever done this. Whenever I do something, I want to do it better than anybody else, right? It's like I'm very competitive. I've played soccer as a little kid on all boys teams. I know what it's like to have to be a fierce warrior and fight and win, right? And I love it. So I'm like, I'm going to do this better than anybody else. And I hit the 2 million mark, and I was like, woohoo, this is awesome. And then in like 5 seconds, the whole excitement got shattered when I got a call saying, hey, your opponent just got $5 million from 2 people, Ken Griffin and Dick Uline. $5 million. She hadn't raised much of anything. But in an instant, boom, caps are off. Now it's like a free-for-all. And I have just my $2 million, which took me a year to raise, like, and it's not easy, just got blown out of the water. So this kind of puts it in perspective. And the governor spent $10 million to try to make sure that I didn't win. And of course I couldn't raise $10 million. We raised a little over 3, but we still won, right? But the money, though, I would have beat her by 15 points if it hadn't been a $10 to $3 million differential. And instead, I only won by 5 percentage points, right? I had no visibility in southern or central Illinois on TV, and it made a difference come election night that the areas where I had won big in a primary were areas that I didn't do well in the general because she was on TV, on radio, everywhere. And so the money makes a difference. So you're looking at why do women not run for the governor's office? It's because you need to be able to compete against a person who has unlimited funds at this particular time in history. And so it's going to be very difficult to do that. Probably, I wouldn't necessarily say impossible because I guess anything can happen, but you also would gauge, do you want to leave a seat where you feel that you're making a significant impact? Really, I would say the controller's position, and people have asked me, why didn't you run? You know, guys like him were egging me on. But you also have to reflect and say to yourself, where am I going to be of best use right now? And I think that without a doubt, if there's been one person, there's been other people that have stood up to this governor, but nobody has to the extent that I have. And I think I've been the most effective at it. And so whoever's running for governor on the Democratic side of the ticket, you know, if I were running for governor, what I'm saying about Governor Rauner would not be taken as seriously and truthfully, because people would just say, oh, come on, well, she's just saying that because she's running against the governor. You'd have to look at it with a really biased, or, it'd be hard to look at it objectively. But my job is to be a truth teller with actual numbers. And I need people to trust that what I'm saying is the truth, because it is the truth. And so, I obviously have my preference for who the governor should be, but whoever it is, I just pray it's a Democrat. And I'm going to hold them as accountable as I am whoever our current governor is, because that's my job. As a proud Democrat, though, to still be truthful when it comes to all of your taxpayer dollars that are being utilized either for good or for bad or not in the best way possible, right? This is my job, to be that truth-telling fiscal watchdog. And it's to hold, right now at this moment in history, this governor, who's been such a complete disaster for our state, for the people who really need government to be there for them, accountable. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I was running for higher office. I do think there will be a day, though, where we're going to have many women look at that and look at it in a way that is realistic and doable. But we also don't want really great women putting it all on the line when it's not possible to win. And I think at this particular time, there really wasn't an ability for, me or Sherry Bustos, who looked at it, or some of the other women that were being talked about potentially to make a run. I don't think that right now was the time. And it's not because we're not fearless or we're not risk takers. Clearly we are, but we're also smart. I think women are pretty smart. And you look at an opportunity and say, is this the right one? And is it going to be the best use of my abilities at this time? And so there will be a day for that, and I hope it's soon, but we'll wait and see.
Well, we should point out Governor Rauner does have an opponent who has a woman who's running against him, Jeannie Ives, from the right. So
Okay.
people are laughing, so you're laughing too.
I'm not
But
laughing, I'm just like, yeah.
Well, I'm celebrating a little bit.
I'm enjoying it.
I'm very
I'm
much enjoying
enjoying
it,
it.
and I'm enjoying the fact that she's not going to be in the General Assembly anymore. That's the best part of this. You talk about people giving up seats where they can be effective. Now, I will say I don't know that she could argue that she was effective, because I don't know that she's actually had any bills signed into law. It's possible she may have had one or two sneak through, but she's gone, and that's awesome.
I know, but
Why?
did you hear that there's
Why
some
is that
rumor
awesome?
that if she
loses, she's going to get reappointed?
The guy who is running for her seat, if he wins, he's going to hand it back to her? That would just be horrendous. But talk about it, just is the irony of it, though, is awesome, right? That they're so ooh, the insider deals are so bad, and they're cutting their own.
And she's cutting her own, right?
Okay, well, she's likely to be replaced by a man, so is that a net loss for this other issue we're talking
No.
about?
Not in this instance.
Why? Explain.
I mean, we're talking about a person who gets up and talks about baby daddies on the House floor. This is not a net benefit to the women of Illinois.
Yeah, or her just vitriol, and she spews hate all the time about people like Kelly and her lovely wife.
Yeah, I mean, she talked
it's
about gay people having children as objects of desire.
Yeah, it's so horrible, the stuff that comes out of her
Yeah.
mouth, honest to God.
So she did this Catholic radio interview during the run-up to marriage. And there was so much wrong in this interview that things, I almost lost pieces of it. But, to put it in a nugget, the dude interviewing her on behalf of a conservative Catholic radio station was trying to, walk her back. The dude was like, well, I don't know that you really mean that. Oh, yes, I do. But in that interview, she talked about, gays and lesbians are trying to weasel their way into legitimacy. So we made buttons with weasels on them. And everybody on the floor were members of the Weasel Caucus.
She's on a tirade about the transgender bathroom.
She does bathroom tirades all the time. I mean, she got up during the Memorial Day service in the House and talked about these soldiers in their beautiful Confederate uniforms. I mean, she's beyond the pale, y'all.
Grab the mic, Ben.
Is there a danger that Jeannie Ives is so far to the right that somehow or other in voters' minds she'll bring Bruce Rauner more to the center and he will appear as a moderate?
Oh, that's a real possibility.
Yeah, she does make him look normal. Look, here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. Anyone who's been following me knows that there's no way in hell that I want Bruce Rauner to get reelected, right? Under no circumstances. But then you think, like, there's only one person that would make me maybe think about voting for the guy. Maybe! If that was my only other choice, like in the game of Who Would You Rather, right? And it's like that one person is running against him over there. So, but like, I just cannot believe that there's ever a scenario where she beats him in the general.
Oh, God,
in the primary,
I don't see
just
it.
no chance. But knowing who he's up against, and he does not like strong women. He doesn't. He doesn't like them at all. He's so
threatened
scared
by
of them.
women. Yeah.
He's so scared of them. So it's like just awesomeness to see Jeannie I just
Well, I mean, it's
tear
the
him
way
up,
he comes
tear
at
him up.
you,
It's the
Susana. The
best.
way he comes at you is so much about your gender.
Of course, but now she's coming at him from the right.
I know,
It's the
it's so much
best.
fun.
Yeah,
Enemy
I'm
of
so
my enemy,
happy.
you and Jeannie should have lunch.
Probably not. But,
I cannot allow
but
this
it's like the
to.
best.
What do you mean? Go a little more into detail about Rauner being threatened by strong women.
And I can speak from my personal experience, and there are other women in the General Assembly that he has actually done well with, who are also strong women, but he definitely has that sort of, okay, little girl, have a seat approach to life. Whether it's not negotiating in good faith with a woman sponsor of a bill, or pretending that Susana didn't make her decisions for herself and instead has like strings and the little thingy on her back, and that Madigan puts all the words in your mouth, because he's a man of so many words and would love for you to say all the things you're saying.
Well, I heard that Madigan put Jeannie Ives up against Rauner.
She's a total Madigan puppet. You heard it here first. Jeannie Ives, Madigan puppet.
All right, a little sarcasm here, but a couple of questions, and we want to get you back in the conversation too, Candace. We're talking a lot of
This never
state
happens at
stuff.
home.
Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, is Jeannie Ives? Is this a great, brilliant Republican strategy to this point to make Rauner look like the centrist in this whole thing?
I think if anything, that's an accidental benefit of it. I mean, Jeannie doing this is Jeannie being Jeannie. Jeannie going
There is an
Jeannie.
actual war
Yes.
within the Republican
no
Party.
doubt, 100%.
There is, but there's also, forget about all the crazy sides of like the stuff that comes out of her mouth on the social stuff, right? But when it comes to the fiscal stuff, she's actually right about how disastrous Governor Rauner has been in terms of his deficit spending, all of the things that so-called fiscal conservatives gripe about, right, that they say they stand for. He does the complete opposite. So you have people who, she's a hawk on many issues. She's like so to the right on everything. But if you want to be concerned about, let's say, wasting taxpayer dollars, I can't say she's wrong about critiquing the governor on that, because absolutely he has wasted more money. He has spent more than any governor in the history of the state of Illinois. And Republicans, just by their mantra, are supposedly not wanting you to spend taxpayer money on pretty much anything, right? So especially the ones that are uber fiscal conservatives. So he's like anathema to that, right? It's like the complete opposite of what they want is the Democratic, now I won't even call it Democrat, that's not fair because we love being Democrats, but he is the worst example of drunken sailor when it comes to spending taxpayer dollars. I mean, when we did the bond deal the other day, he had to disclose what the deficit spending was to date in order to be able to sell these bonds so that we could refinance part of this outstanding bill backlog that we had, that he tripled, right, since taking office. But essentially, they had to come clean on the fact that there was $2.8 billion worth of deficit spending that nobody knew about, including me as a controller, which is why I passed this Debt Transparency Act. But Representative Dave McSweeney, who's like a super fiscal hawk, he is all over this. Jeannie Ives is all over this. So like two people that are not afraid to stand up to the governor from the Republican side of the aisle, and this is where we can be actually thankful that we have Republicans who are now willing to stand up to Governor Rauner and really call him out for being a total waster and massive spender in a not healthy or productive way for the populace, right? And so this is good. It's not just the Democrats that are actually calling him out for being a total, just waster of your money. It's actually Jeannie Ives, who's running against him, but more importantly, Dave McSweeney, who's not.
I found myself, I usually, sometimes when you're not 100% sure of how to vote on a bill, you kind of watch the board and sort of figure out where people are landing. And it's a fairly safe bet that if Jeannie's voting yes, you're not going to want to vote yes. But in these last several months, you do have these moments where you're like, man, I gotta vote with her, you know?
All right, Susana, I have to follow up on the Mike Madigan issue. Mike Madigan has backed you throughout your career. Ed Burke has backed you. Madigan in particular, obviously this is the boogeyman for Governor Rauner. It has been, it's going to continue to be. He's going to pretend like he's running against Mike Madigan this next year. Isn't this just a smart political strategy for Governor Rauner, knowing that Mike Madigan is perhaps even less popular than he is, to try to link you to Mike Madigan? Isn't that smart politically? Wouldn't you do that if you were him?
Well, he does it for everyone, though. It's not just me. I mean, I think you hear it more about me because I've been so outspoken against the governor, so every time I open my mouth on anything, even if like the evidence is 100% there to back me up, which is typically what I do, is he will laugh it off, so he won't answer the question. So like they'll ask him, so Governor, Comptroller Mendoza, is asking, what did you do with the $2.8 billion and how do you intend to pay it back? Fair question, right? How are we going to pay it back? He'll say, ha, 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 ha. Because he's thinking about what his whopper's going to be. So pay attention next time, all right? You hear the governor being interviewed and he starts laughing, you know that complete CRAP is going to be coming out of it. All right, so then he'll say something like, well, that's just Comptroller Mendoza doing Mike Madigan's bidding, or she's so full of baloney. Baloney, that's like his latest thing, baloney, And so I joked around the other day.
He's losing the vegetarian
I said,
vote.
this guy, you could feed a whole state prison with all the baloney coming out of the governor's mouth, right? But he loves to talk baloney, baloney, baloney. And so this is his only line. And he does it with me. He'll do it with anybody. He does it with, the gubernatorial candidates. He does it with and even Republicans that voted for the budget to literally save the state of Illinois. They were somehow magically fell under the speaker's wizardry, right? But the reality of it is yes, I've had support from the party, but let me tell you and remind everyone that I ran against the Speaker Madigan's candidate when I first got elected to office. So I was elected when I was 27 years old, but I ran when I was 25. And I ran against an incumbent fully supported by the Speaker, and I lost by 55 votes, and it was heartbreaking. It's like this room here, right? So 55 votes, and I lost, and it was...
I'd rather lose by thousands.
I know, it's almost how it feels, seriously, Kelly, right? But then at the same time, I was so young, and I thought, man, I almost beat an incumbent. Like 30 minutes after, saying I'd never do it again, I was like, I totally got to run again, right? And then I ran again, and the Speaker, it's not like he said, this kid came close. She might actually beat my incumbent next time. Maybe I'm going to befriend the little Susana Mendoza, right? No, he doubled down against me. And I ran, and I won the second time, going against the Speaker's candidate with 55% of the vote, not by 55 votes. So it's like I killed it the second time. So I got there on my own, right? I got there on my own. It was a good 4 years before the Speaker and I were even on, good terms. We weren't on bad terms. We just were on terms that were like, hey, you didn't help me get here. I got here on my own, and I only owe my seat to my constituents. And we can have a mutual respect, right? You're the Speaker of the House. I can respect that. I'm a duly elected state representative, and you're going to have to respect that. I didn't need you. You worked against me, and I still won, right? But I didn't have to be horrible and nasty and not want to work with him just because he worked against me. I'm there now, right? So he's the leader of the House, and I'm a working member. And I'm going to work with whoever I need to work with, including all of the Republicans like I did when I was a freshman, because I knew that I couldn't rely upon the Speaker to hold my hand and get votes for me. I didn't want to. I needed to continue to prove that I could do this on my own with the help of building coalitions that were not coalitions that he built for me, right? So over the years, he learned to respect me, and that's why he supports me, because I work my tail off and I get stuff done. And proof of that is that I just kicked the governor's butt on an override of his veto, and the Speaker didn't make a single phone call for me. I never even spoke to him about this legislation that I was moving forward. I just work my tail off. So contrary to the governor's suggestions or claims, he's just full of baloney himself. And it is what it is. He doesn't know what it's like to actually put sweat equity, right? Actually work an idea and talk to people to get stuff done, but you have to do that. And that's where it was helpful for me to be a legislator, because I know what it takes to talk to your colleagues and get the votes that you need to get stuff done. And I managed to override his veto unanimously in the House of Representatives. It's never happened. Every single Republican sided with me against their own governor. 112 to 0.
And this is for transparency.
This is for the
and states-
transparency bill, so that now you, like the state agencies, have to tell me how many bills they have on hand every month instead of just once a year. And it's like too long to get into. You just look it up on my website. Well, not my website, but just Google Susana Mendoza Debt Transparency Act and you'll hear all about it. But the point is, we smoked him and it hurt his feelings and he's still a little raw. You know, it hurts. It hurts. So this is why he's so mean. He's so mean. And it's okay. It's all about forgiveness in the new year. And, you know, come November when he loses, I'll be very nice to him.
I still think you guys would do the same thing if you were him. All right, let's talk about politics. Candace, there's this debate that's going on within the Democratic Party here and across the country about you shouldn't get, you know, it's looking good very early on for Democrats, you know, in 2018. You know, everyone's saying it could be a Democratic year. But there's this debate. We shouldn't get too much into gender or identity politics because that alienates people in the center. What do you think about that? What is that a winning strategy, or is that ultimately you talk? What do you think
You're a
about
good
that?
interviewer. That's awesome. All right, good. So, you know, I think one of the things that people gloss over or don't remember is that, you know, gender and identity politics, you know, encompasses everyone, no matter where you are, you know, in a party or in a country, in a community. I think what we're seeing is the women who are taking the impetus from the Women's March, women and trans people who are seeing their rights that they've gained being taken back or attempted to take back. And yes, those folks are saying, I'm going to do something about this. And we absolutely need people to say, I'm going to do something about this. But, you know, we saw in Virginia, you know, not only, you know, the you know, statewide, a trans candidate won a state house seat against someone who very, very obviously and proudly ran as a homophobe and as a transphobe, I'm sure, but he wouldn't even use that word. So, you know, Danica Roman. We also saw statewide in Virginia, you know, Democrats retaining both the governor and lieutenant governor and the attorney general seat, which was huge. And so it's about, you know, recognizing that we are all in this together, and that yes, you know, for too long we have not had enough female candidates. We've not had enough queer people running, and we do need more of that. And at the same time, recognizing that, you know, it's not just because those folks are of a particular gender or identity that they're running and winning, but because their ideas are sound and because they have the support. And you know, here in Illinois, the Human Rights Campaign, which is a political organization, but also an education and outreach. We have a foundation that does that kind of work, but most of you probably know us politically. We endorsed Marie Newman in the primary against Lipinski, which a few other national works have done, but not all, because he's a D. But
this is the southwest side near suburban district. Traditionally
Midway,
thought of as
yeah.
conservative,
Right.
conservative area.
But he has not done anything to advance fairness, equality, healthcare, and you know. So you know, as an organization, we're like, we would do much better without him. Yes, he's a D, but that's about it, right? So you know, taking those steps and you know, looking at ways that we can, you know, maybe do things a little differently than we would have before, you know, as a way to continue moving forward. Because you know, any attack on people's healthcare, any attack on immigrants, any attack, it affects the LGBTQ community, and you know, we need to be actively engaged in making sure that the people who are representing our country are representing everybody, and not just some.
That's right.
Well, I think, I mean, you raised Danica as a great example. You know, she didn't run as a trans candidate. She ran as, I mean, she did the retail politics, first of all, and we all, you're a freaking master at it. But that's key. You know, we're not, my first race, it was, you know, was national news because it was two lesbians running against each other. It was some bizarre, you know, it was ridiculous. But, I'm not gonna go there. But we presented ideas. Danica presented ideas and spoke forcefully and actively and intelligently about a highway. I mean, this woman ran and won because she was going to fix a highway. That's incredibly sexy, you know, like, but that's how she won. And so, yes, identity politics is important, but it's really about, you know, I'm a policy wonk that identifies as a lesbian. I am a forceful advocate for all of my constituents. I amplify all of my constituents' voices, and part of that is because I know what it means for my voice not to be amplified. That's the difference.
Well, the Republicans successfully played upon fears and hatred on this issue for years. And Suzanne, I want to ask you, you ran statewide. You won statewide, you won in districts and areas. You had to run where Trump was successful, where Rauner was successful. Have you ever felt the pressure to back off your support on these issues because you didn't want to alienate the so-called Trump voters or the Rauner voters?
I think it's, you know, as they say, all politics is local, right? And I think that's very true. Depending on where you are, the problems are different. So we share a lot of commonalities upstate with downstate, but we're also very different. And it's okay to acknowledge that. And I think like one of the things that are important, I think, in running statewide is actually spending time all over the state, right? Acknowledging that the problems in Chicago might be very different from the problems in Des Moines, right? Which is really far south for those of you who haven't been there. But, and I'll give you an example. Like if you go to, in Chicago, the issue of guns, right? It's a huge issue. And the issue of guns is a huge issue down south, but in two totally polar different ways, right? In Chicago, it's all about limiting access to guns and gun control laws and stuff like that. And down south, it's the complete opposite. But it's not because people want to go around shooting people, it's because they're shooting pheasants or they're shooting, you know, deer during, you know, deer season. And it's part of the culture, actually, almost like the heritage or the tradition of the people in Southern Illinois. So the fact that oftentimes people from Northern Illinois pretend as if the Southern Illinois people don't exist or they're just like, you know, backwards, or the people in Southern Illinois pretend that Northerners don't care about anybody other than themselves, like none of these things are true. We're all so much more similar than we are different, but when we don't talk to each other, it's really easy to stereotype each other. And so the issues go along with that. In Southern Illinois, you know, I'll give you an example. A dear friend of mine lives in Des Moines, and I won't mention names because we're being taped here, but he'd probably laugh if he saw this. And, you know, they're Democrats, and these are Democrats that have to go out and get votes for other Democrats, right? And he was talking about a candidate they were supposed to go out and get votes for who is super, super liberal. Like on every issue, you guys would love her, right? Would love her. But in Southern Illinois, on every issue that we would all love her for, they would vote against her for, right? So he's like, how am I supposed to go door to door to get votes for this candidate, knowing that on every single issue, 9 out of 10 times, my Democrats here in Southern Illinois are so socially conservative that they would vote against her. If they knew that she's anti-gun, she's pro-choice, which they call pro-abortion, and she is anti-gays, right? So let's just start right there. Pro-abortion. And I'm like, well, you know it's called pro-choice, right? And they go, when I get the mailer, I'm reading pro-abortion. This is how they say it. And they go, so don't tell me about that. Send me a mailer that says that what is she going to do for job creation here, right? What is she going to do for education here? Like, talk about the areas where we can agree, and that's what I want to hear about, because we probably know where she stands on the gun stuff and on the social stuff, and we don't need to think about it because it's not at the top of our list here in this area of the state. We care about education. We care about jobs because we don't have any. Like, talk to me about what you're going to do there. Don't put your social agenda in my face. And then you can have it. I just don't need you to remind me about it every 5 minutes. So my friend goes, ask me what I think about gay marriage. And I go, what do you think about gay marriage? He goes, I hope they have a job. I thought that was awesome. I can't believe more people didn't laugh. I thought it was the funniest thing. He's like, I hope they have a job. And basically it's putting into perspective that what matters there to them is the job opportunities and lack thereof. The second time I went down, it was probably like the fifth time, but second time from that first time about what do I think about gay marriage, the whole issue of transgender bathrooms was happening, right? We're debating this in the legislature, and it was all over the news. And we had this conversation again. You know why we like you, Susana? And I said, why? I go, because you're here. Because you're actually here. So I don't really care what your politics are. The fact that you're here and you continue to come here, this is probably the fifth or sixth time I was in that part of Southern Illinois. He said that anything else, they know I'm pro-choice. They know that I'm for gun control in Chicago, but I understand the issue of guns down south, right? They know that I have my own thoughts and belief system in politics, but they also know that I care about them because I'm down there trying to understand what's important to that region of the state and seeing how I can help. So this whole issue of transgender bathrooms came up. They go, ask me what I think about transgender bathrooms. And I said, what do you think about transgender bathrooms? They go, I hope they're peeing at work. That's awesome. So again, it's not an issue of having to hide from what my beliefs are, because I think people, when they ask me, I'm going to tell them. Because the one thing I will never do is pretend to be something that I'm not. Or pretend to be for something because you're for it if I'm not for it. But I also listen to people, and I want to get a feel for what's important to them. And maybe that's part of the reason why we lost in November, because we stopped listening to people. We started as Democrats believing that we know what's best for you. And there might be something about my agenda that you're not for. And I have to at least pretend, not pretend, but I have to self-reflect and say, not everybody's going to believe the way I do, but I have to be respectful of what your concerns are and try to figure out if there's a way that I can still be helpful, even if it's on an issue that I'm not necessarily all for. But just don't pretend to be somebody you're not, and listen to people and what their concerns are. And then I think the rest of the politics just kind of slips to the side without having to compromise anything. Does that make sense?
Here's a great example of that. When the medical marijuana program went into play. Now, I'm one of the, with you gone, I'm one of the loudest voices for gun control in the General Assembly. But I do it as a child of the South. My first car had a gun rack in it. I put umbrellas in it, but, it came with a gun rack. What's that? Was it pink? The umbrella, yes, of course. The gun rack wasn't, but, older me would look back and paint that gun rack pink. But it was a yellow pickup truck. It was the best car. I loved the car. Anyway, I digress. So when the medical marijuana program came into place, all of these FOID card holders were getting letters from the state police saying that their FOID card was being revoked. FOID is the Firearm Owner's Identification Card that Illinois requires for gun owners, because they had applied for medical marijuana cards. And lo and behold, I became this fierce defender of the Second Amendment, attempting to reinstate the gun rights of my constituents and others as word spread, because I started getting calls from all over the state, people who were getting these calls from the state police. Because we don't revoke the FOID card of people who get oxycodone prescriptions, So these are those places where you meet somebody where they are, you hear them, you give a damn, frankly, and that makes all the difference in the world. I wasn't able to get their full rights restored. I refer to it as the little bit pregnant solution, because the state police took back the words of revoking FOID cards, but they don't let them buy any more cards. And I did want to ask which half of the FOID card they were revoking. But they do get to keep their cards, they just don't get to buy more.
All right, well, all that said, the governor signed legislation sponsored primarily by Democrats that will possibly provide for public funding of abortions in Illinois. And the backlash from within his party, as we alluded to earlier, has been fierce, or at least vocal. So can you really meet the minds all the way? And how is that particular issue going to play out? Again, is this Ronner being genius and moving himself to the center with the help of Democrats and and making it tougher for Democratic candidates? I mean, what do you guys think?
I really have trouble thinking that much of what he's done, especially of late, is very deliberate. You know, he is the working definition of mercurial. And
Doesn't that cause cancer too, by the way?
I think it might. You know, I mean, he was in a lose-lose situation with House Bill 40, and God bless Terry Cosgrove. We call him Constituent Zero in our office. He's another one of those constituents that I love having. But you know, he could have helped himself by not promising to veto it and then going back on that promise. You know, he does. This is where sort of the understanding how politics works, how the legislature works, might have made him slightly less of a disaster of a governor, because he's really flying by the seat of his pants half the time, I think. And then he does the laughing thing to try to come up with an answer. So I don't know that it was an intentional thing to, you know, other than I think that his sort of operating strategy is if you can't convince them, confuse them. And so it does fall into that category, but I don't think it was intentional on his part to go back and forth.
I mean, he sat on that bill for a long time, though. I have a hard time thinking that it was totally random, his decision in the end.
I actually think it was the peacemaker bill. This was the Rauner marriage-saving decision. That's just my own personal opinion.
Within his own household,
Yes,
you mean?
yeah.
Yeah. We're not talking in metaphors here.
That's literal. I think that was like, come on, man. I put up with a lot.
Well, wasn't that the weight all about? Like he was examining the issue, wasn't that the PR strategy?
It was a really long.
Yeah, it was a
bill.
long wait. He brought people in, but
Yeah.
come on, let's remember that great moment. He was bringing people in for photo ops. He's like, I'm really thinking about this. I'm thinking a little harder.
Thinking about this.
Thinking about it, man.
I think the problem with his party revolting on him isn't even so much on the issue of abortion. It's on the issue of him lying to them about what he was going to do.
And that's
so-
exactly what I mean.
so
By he
that's-
didn't need
yeah.
to promise to veto
That's,
it.
that's it. He lied. I mean, there's no other way around it. You have Cardinal Supich in front of you, and you make a promise to the Cardinal, right? Like, I mean, he could have maybe lied to everybody else, and there was plausible deniability, right? But he lied to the Cardinal. So once you lie to the Cardinal, it's like all bets are off, you know. And so I think that was the biggest fail of all. That's why he lost his base, right? I mean, that group of people that, like, no matter what, will not be with him anymore. They're for Jeannie Ives 100%. This was an important issue to them, but it was also like a slap in the face by a guy that they've defended through like all kinds of horrible decisions, because he told them that he was going to veto this thing and then it ends up flipping.
Right,
So-
and I think that they could have been mad for a minute. You know, he would have signed it, they would have been mad.
Had he not said he was
Yeah.
going to veto it, right?
Yeah.
That was his mistake, was
It-
saying I'm going to veto it and then actually not veto it.
Right.
He
I mean-
said when he was running in 2014 he was going to sign it, and they still voted for him.
Right, that's what I mean. He could have just done it, or he could have just
But
let it
they
become
knew
law.
it wasn't a secret that he said he was
Yeah.
pro-choice. Although, as of late, he says he's the most pro-life governor because
Well,
he is,
politically the most pro-life,
politically
not
because
personally.
he is supported every single pro-life Republican, and his wallet is there to prove it. So it's like, again, he wants to have it both ways, you know, and you can't. People, I think, are not as dumb as he would like to think they are. And, you know, to some of us there, some people who do have Donald Trump as
A member
proof
of the
that,
audience begs to differ.
Yeah. But I think that's what he's
People
banking on. You know,
being
he's
dumb.
banking on that hopefully people are dumb. And I would like to think still that is, you know, that might work for a little while. And after a while, come on. I mean, you have to acknowledge that it's just not, the emperor has no clothes. And I think this emperor has been naked for quite a while. And people now see it, and it's disgusting. It is. It's totally nasty.
Can't unsee
It's
that.
totally gross. Your eyes have like retinal burn. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Throw a blanket on him until November, and you know, we now know. So, but his own party now knows that. And people who are paying attention, these are people who would have blindly voted for him in the last election. So I do feel that he made a calculated decision. And I don't know that it was necessarily because of the misses, but maybe you're onto something there. But he, at the end of the day, figured, look, these people are going to be with me no matter what. My conservative base. they'll get over it, they're going to whine about it and cry about it, but are they really going to vote for a Democrat? No way. This is the political calculation. I need to, though, win the suburban women who voted for me the first time.
Oh, I don't disagree with that.
And without
Yeah.
them, I'm toast. So I can have as much of my base, and they could be all hungry to re-elect me. But without the suburban women who are pro-choice, they might be super fiscal conservatives. But when it comes to abortion, they're pro-choice. I can't lose them. This is
but
what I think he was thinking.
He may. I know it's what he's thinking.
And it was worth ticking off the
But
base
he may
for a
run into
small
the
time.
Hillary Clinton problem in reverse, where Hillary took her base for granted and did not deliver it.
And the same thing with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally think. I mean, I said this to one of his staff members early in session when they came to me to talk about House Bill 40, like trying some sort of shuttle diplomacy or something. I'm not even sure what they were trying for, but I said at that point, just sign it, shut up, sign it, let it become law. They'll come home. But he blew that with the promise.
Has he called you guys on your birthdays?
I used to get these calls. I didn't get my birthday's in November.
There's a context to this question because when I was back at the Reader, Ben and I were doing a story about his schedule. There were lots of blank spots on there, lots of obfuscation. There's obviously another broader schedule that he wasn't releasing to journalists under the Freedom of Information Act somewhere. But on this one, we thought it was really interesting. At the bottom of each daily calendar, there was call so-and-so and call so-and-so for their birthday. So you got a call.
I used to get calls. Yeah, I saved the voicemails because they're hilarious. But I waited this November. No birthday call.
I did get a sharp pain in my side. And now I'm wondering, like, it wasn't a birthday call, but maybe it was like one of those voodoo dolls or something. Could be for my birthday. I don't know. I was fine. Nothing happened. But it just for a second there, I felt paralyzation for 1 second. It's like ah. So maybe
I wasn't paying attention. I mean, maybe like
May
my pinched
13th.
nerve.
I don't know.
So no birthday call for you. Okay. I have one other kind of personal question before we open it up to audience questions. A political marriage here, not in the sense that people think about political marriage. Both of you guys are involved
Gals. Both of these gals.
in gals.
I use
Thank
guys
you,
kind of in a
thank
gender
you.
neutral way. I know.
I know.
It's nice to
I
have
deserve
fun.
that, though. I deserve that. Yeah. You humans, you living beings, the two living beings here on stage. So do you talk about politics over dinner? I mean, what? Do you have debates? Are there issues where you're debating politically? I should ask this question differently. What's the last political debate you guys had?
I have no flippin' idea.
I mean, it's really about like how spicy should the chili be.
That's really, yeah. I mean, for the most part, we're pretty the same on politics.
Have you had Newt over for Thanksgiving?
No, but we had a lovely brunch with him and the kids and Callista before they went to Rome. It was sweet. Yes, the ambassador.
Yeah, it was.
I
No,
know
it was
you get these
lovely.
questions a lot, so I'm apologizing in advance. But who is Newt? I mean, we see him as kind of an ogre. Is he? You said you're describing this experience with him as sweet. So there's another side. There's another side to Newt that we haven't seen in public.
So yeah, so he's 23 years older than I am. I was an aunt before I was even born. But in that situation, like we've never lived in the same house together, so in ways he's much more like an uncle than a brother. So we are siblings, but we never grew up together. So I've never seen him more than maybe twice a year or 3 times a year, and when we do, those are the only times we get together, and so it's nice. We tend to really work really hard not to talk about politics.
We talked about politics the entire brunch.
Well, that was you. You talked about politics.
No, literally,
You did.
I was sort of there. It was, but it was fun. I mean, here's a guy who, that's a fun brain.
He does know politics.
Right, I mean, it was super
Yes.
fun. And you're an appropriator. I mean, it was great. It was very fun. And then, the boys got involved, and it was just a family
Did
member.
anyone agree with Newt at the brunch?
We didn't talk, issues. It was more sort of the business of politics, the mechanics of
I
politics,
see.
and that was fun. We didn't really. a little bit of Trump stuff, a little bit of Rauner stuff, which was kind of fun.
He follows Rauner.
He's aware of him, and aware of the parallels, and so that we talked about that a little bit, which was sort of entertaining, because he's aware that crazy is driving the bus. There's a certain instability. That it's not a professional. Let's say that he's aware that we do not have a professional behind the wheel. And so that was an interesting conversation, like comparing the businessman thing.
Well, here's a question I have for you. And I read a story today, and we really should open to the audience, but I have to ask you, professional politicians, this question. I think it was in the Washington Post, I was telling Mick about it, that all the usual things that matter are working for Trump. The economy's booming, the stock market's going up, et cetera, et cetera. And they were looking at Iowa. They were doing this in the context of Iowa, and they were saying that Trump is his unpopularity. His rating is I think his popularity rating, or favorable rating is what they call it. It's like 34% in Iowa, a state that he won decisively by in 2016. So all the usual measures that determine how a president does are in his favor, but they're not working. And so, what do you make of that? I know what I make of it, but I'm curious what you folks make of it. The fact that people are judging this president by different standards than they would judge, let's say, Clinton or Bush, etc.
I'm not a professional politician, just a professional queer. I get paid for it. It's still a hobby for me out there. But to me, it is that he has, I think, I'm going to say the word singularly, but it's been plurally, taken it upon himself to attack so many different people, different groups of people, different, by gender, by race, by religion, by, all sorts of things. And it's not, as we know, it's not just that individual who he is attacking. That individual has friends and family members and neighbors and coworkers that care about the fact that this person, human, is, is attacking or trying to and making life more difficult for people that they care about, if not themselves. And so, for me, that's one of the reasons I think that his approval ratings are so low.
So he's so offensive that he's offended people regardless of what the economy is.
And offended, and not in a a non-PC way, but offended, you're attacking, you are purposefully doing things to make life more difficult, if possible at all, for people that I care about.
So basically nobody likes a bully.
Yeah, pretty much so.
34% of people do, and I'm worried about that.
That was something to be concerned
Who are
about,
these
no
people?
question.
Yeah. Well, over 70% of the white people in Alabama voted for Roy Moore. So yeah, you really want to be worried. Anyway.
It's the reason the South is in my rear view.
Okay.
Let's get some audience questions.
Very basic fiscal question. What would it take, how high do taxes in Illinois need to go before we get our budget situation and our pension situation stabilized? What would those tax rates look like compared to all of our neighboring states? And if we ever get honest with the whole situation and start paying what we need to pay, is there anyone who's going to want to stay in Illinois?
All right, so easy question to start off. That's awesome. Yeah.
And like I said, how about your birthday? When's on your birthday?
So I don't know the answer to that. I'm not trying to skirt it. I just don't know the answer to that because there's so many variables that come into play, right? It's like, do you tackle this all at once? Do they piecemeal it? We've got a $200 million now, close to that unfunded pension liability.
Billion.
That's what I meant, billion. You're right. That's a big difference. Billion. We have now. We managed to pay down the bill backlog from what was 16.7 billion to between 9 and 10 billion right now, and it'll fluctuate in that ballpark for the next, few months, assuming that we actually pass a budget at the end of May, right? Which is a whole nother variable. So this question of what are the taxes going to have to be? God only knows, because first is first. We have to get through this next budget cycle, and we still have Governor Rauner as governor. And he's done everything within his power to actually avoid doing his constitutionally mandated job of introducing balanced budget proposals and then working with people like Kelly and her colleagues to actually get a budget passed, right? So everyone knows that the budget proposal that the governor presents is not going to be the final product. So this concept that I'm not going to present my budget because they're just going to shoot it down is so like juvenile, like grade school, I'm going to take my toys and go home with them, you know? It's not something that a governor who is in charge would do. Clearly this guy's already acknowledged he's not. But like you still have to do it, right? You have to do it. You can't run for governor and then not actually do your most basic constitutionally mandated obligation, which is Article 8, Section 2A of the Constitution, that says that the governor, not Kelly Cassidy and her colleagues, not the speaker, not the Senate president, not a single Republican member of either chamber, it's the governor of the state of Illinois who shall prepare and submit a budget, balanced budget proposal where revenues, expenditures do not exceed revenues, right? So that means balance. He didn't do that any one of the times that he's been governor. And then part B is these guys get to work on actually coming up with what the final budget's going to look like and then eventually pass it and the governor is supposed to sign it or veto it or override, whatever. But point is, none of that has happened. This has been the weirdest anomaly over the last 3 years. We're going into one last season of Governor Rauner at the helm. With no, yes. We have to own it. I'm calling it right now. He's going to lose in November. All right. Owning it. But we still have to get through this next fiscal year, right? And as controller, that scares the living bejesus out of me. I'm thinking, like, this was really hard to try to, like, make sure people don't die on my watch. Trying to triage with the limited cash flow that I have on a day-to-day basis when I have a governor who is literally taking actions that go contrary to saving people's lives, right? I'm not being dramatic here. This is the reality of what it's like to have to manage through a fiscal crisis of this nature. So we can't even talk about fixing the problem when the huge problem right now to our state's finances is actually a guy by the name of Bruce V. Rauner. So he is actually a leading cause as to why our debt has tripled over the last 3 years. This has never happened until now. And again, a Republican governor, which should not be the norm, right? So we will have to have some sort of revenue increase, but I would suggest that it should be a progressive income tax that passes. And not just look at like how much we're gonna have to raise taxes, but totally restructure how we even pay taxes. And that has to happen. The beauty of it is that every Democratic gubernatorial candidate has made a pledge to work for and pass a progressive income tax. And that's going to be the beginning of what that formula is going to be on how we get out of this fiscal mess.
And to that point, I think the most important thing, they're not leaving because it costs too much. They're leaving because they don't know what the heck we're going to do next. People want predictability. People want to be able to plan. People want to know what's coming. And a solid, thoughtful, progressive tax system will do exactly that, and it will bring the revenue in that we need. What the rates are going to be, we have to figure that out as we go. But
and for everyone who thinks that legalizing pot is going to solve our budget, it won't. It will certainly help.
It's going to help.
I want to be clear about this because
it's not magic.
I get it all the time. People say, "Oh, just pass pot and like all that will fill every budget hole." I mean, it literally will be a drop in the bucket, although certainly a welcome drop in the bucket. But you're talking about, a few hundred, not even $1 billion, and we just our bill backlog today is almost $10 billion. So
well, a member of the voting public says that we'll be too high to care. So, you'll
feel better about it, I guess. But yeah.
Do you think our not getting Amazon will be any kind of wake-up call?
Hey, we already got Amazon, didn't we? That's what Governor Rauner said. It was on his top 10 list.
I hope we don't get Amazon. How about that?
all right. Next question. How about in the back there?
Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about this. So I grew up in Gene Ives' district, gay teen, and it was obviously rough in Wheaton. Everyone can imagine that. And so the political part of me is very much like, I like to see her needle Bruce Rauner because I love it, right? And I think ultimately it does hurt him in the general. But my question is, how much leeway do we still give to someone to peddle her ideas, someone who has built her political career on harming LGBTQ children? How much of that discourse do we allow even if it is coming, even if it is politically behooving us, right? That's what I struggle with. Again, I love to see her needle in, but at the same time, her views actually bring harm to children.
We don't allow her to do it at all.
Right.
Frankly,
She
none.
has zero
There's
leeway
no room
from
for
us.
that. There's no room for that. I lived in Wheaton, accidentally.
Me too, actually. Me too.
When I first moved up to Illinois, I had a 100-pound dog and just took the house that would let me have my 100-pound dog, and it happened to be in Wheaton, right off the campus of Wheaton College. How God has a very twisted sense of humor, but so I have to say, my neighbors in Wheaton, with the cake lady exception, aren't those people, right? I mean, I don't think she's well loved because she's personally pretty abhorrent. I mean, she's just not somebody you even want to have beer with, right? But we don't give her room for that. We don't allow it. We don't give her space for that because, frankly, as Susana said, the things she's really going after him on, the fiscal policies, that's good, right? That's that point where you can go, oh wow, everybody thinks this guy's an idiot. But the other stuff, yes, we continue to call her out. We don't give her space for that. Period.
Yeah, big time. It's just so disgusting. So no one's cheering her on, trust me. We're calling her out every second that needs to be called out. There is just a sick, twisted irony in the fact that she's now needling Bruce Rauner, so we kind of have to enjoy that a little bit. I mean, give us something here. Give us something.
Well, the odds of GDI is pulling a Roy Moore or a Dave Bratt for Rauner, pulling...
In the primary?
Yes.
I think it's probably pretty slim,
Really?
frankly, but I mean, it's possible that she could beat him in the primary.
Also, one more thing. Jim Durkin's primary opponent is being called a Madigan lackey, too.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, that's the go-to. I mean, that's just the go-to, and he is being supported by the trades anyway, not the public employee unions, but that's the go-to, right? I mean, I get called a Madigan lackey, which I think even Madigan would laugh at.
I mean, seriously, the Republicans are being called Madigan lackeys now. So if they voted for the budget, and I'm telling you as controller, these people helped save the state of Illinois.
Yes.
There's no, I'm not being overly dramatic. We would have gone into the abyss like never before. We would not probably be even right now talking to each other. It would be a very different situation fiscally for the state. As bad as things are right now, they are monumentally better because we passed a budget as full of warts as it may have been. There's no other vote that should have been taken that day than a yes vote. So they really did help save the state of Illinois, and for that I'm very thankful.
And most of them are leaving.
Yes,
So we're
almost all
not
of them.
going to have a better Republican caucus.
But they were all called Madigan lackeys after that. It was just so disrespectful. Now these are people who probably have never even spoken to the Speaker of the House.
I spent
yet
time with a lot of
huge
those
puppets,
folks
right?
leading up to that vote. It was
so
the hardest thing
shameful.
they've ever taken.
Yeah.
The hardest vote they've ever taken, and they knew what they were doing. They knew that that many of them were walking off the cliff, and they knew they were doing it out of a place of true service.
That's right.
Where do we move forward with the new tax laws that are coming in for Illinois?
The federal ones, you mean?
Federal tax, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. The Department of Revenue would probably have a better idea of when they're going to institute those rules. I know when we passed the tax increase here in Illinois, it took some time because what happens is that Department of Revenue, which is a state agency, it's not ours, they determine the rules for notifying all the employers as to when they have to abide by the new tax law. And then we get notified as to when those withdrawals are going to start to happen from people's paychecks. And then eventually we get the money. And then we can start now putting tax revenues into the treasury, right? So what happens is it takes months. So like people were saying, hey, you guys passed a budget and it had a tax increase and they're already taking it out of my paycheck. What do you mean that you still can't pay any bills? You know, it took some time after July 6th that tax increase passed. We didn't see the first revenues come in until almost the end of September. So it kind of gives you an idea. There's like a 2-month or so leeway, and that's with the state. I really don't know how the federal is going to be implementing the new changes, but I'm sure we'll know within a matter of a few days.
As a concerned Chicago school citizen, I guess my question would be, what are the policies, or what do you see, I guess, as far as as revenues what can we do to actually provide more revenues for Chicago Public Schools? I think that's probably one of my main concerns. I get tired of getting emails from teachers who can't even have, don't even have like school supplies.
So the new school funding bill will help, but even because frankly the way we have funded education for years has been a hot mess and has really favored people in property wealthy districts, but we've dug a big hole, and just like Comptroller Mendoza was talking about all the other holes we've dug, this is a hole that's been generations in the making in terms of what we've dug in. The new formula will eventually get us to a place of equity, but it's going to take some time. I think that we need, probably for this year, I think it's another $350 million needs to be added in to help bring some of these below adequacy districts like Chicago and others around the state closer to equity. So that progressive income tax is important. Some of the corporate tax loophole closures are important. Quite frankly, it's not all the money in the world, but cannabis legalization has an earmark for education in it. Colorado, they're building schools left, right, and sideways. They have social workers in every school because they have tagged that money for their school systems. So we have to be creative. We have to find other ways to do this. That step we took with that bill, which I ended up voting against because of the voucher program, the rest of the work that went into it is pretty awesome and will get us moving in that direction. But it's going to take a lot of time. You don't fill a generations old hole in 1 year.
When the state of Illinois legalized gambling in the form of the lottery, wasn't that money supposed to be earmarked for education?
It does, and it's not going out the back door either. We're just not growing that other money the way we should be. We stopped. We were already prorating before the lottery. We just kept prorating what we were supposed to be putting in. By prorating, it's, we don't have money to do 100% of the formula, so this year we're going to do 90%, this year we're going to do 80%. So that money does go in, but this is the cautionary tale that the comptroller talks about. People sold the lottery as a panacea. I don't want to legalize cannabis because of the money. I want to legalize cannabis because it's the right thing to do, because prohibition hasn't worked, because there's a huge social justice component, and we'll get a few pennies out. It won't solve the problem, and I think the mistake was people believed that legalizing gambling was the answer.
The lottery was actually going to pay for all of education. But let me put this in perspective, because I actually am the one who writes the checks. So every month prior to the new education bill passing, right, which will tweak the formula a little bit, our office puts out about $240 million a month. Am I right, Abden? I want to make sure I don't screw up my numbers here. $240 million bucks, more or less, a month towards education. $240 million a month, right? So do the math on that. Then the Illinois lottery, all of it is about $600 million. Is that right? I think so. $600 million for the entire year.
So shout out to Abden having to know all these numbers, by the way.
Well, I have to remember them all, but it's, I've had a whole week off, folks. It starts to get fuzzy. But no,
Abden has to reluctantly put his pipe down and do some fact checking.
So I want to make sure. Usually I'm spotting out my numbers without having had any alcohol prior to that. Okay.
Mad love for the staff.
Yes. So just saying. But in any event, so $600 million, it's a lot of money, but in the scheme of things, it's a drop in the bucket, right? When every month it's $240 million, that's not including categorical dollars. And for those of you in education, categorical school dollars are incredibly important because they go to pay for special education and transportation and things of that nature. Those are separate from your core school K through 12 education priority payments that I have to make that I have no flexibility on. And by flexibility, I mean that on any given month, people are not getting paid on time. And this is not news. Like, everyone has known that for months now. Actually, doctors have gone 2 years without getting paid by the state of Illinois.
I just got an explanation of benefits for a hospitalization in 2015.
Okay. And it's now 2018. So dentists primarily hadn't been paid for over 2 years. Many doctors in the state of Illinois had not been paid for 2 years. So when you think that when it comes to K through 12 education, those are payments that I cannot delay. So I have to make them every month, no matter what. $240 million goes out the door, and then the categorical school payments, the ones for like special ed and buses and things that are super important, but those legally can be delayed. So they don't have to go out on the same day of every month, by law. And those had already, when I took office in December of 2016, the prior controller had delayed 2 of those, and they're categoricals that are quarterly. So imagine that. That's, 6 months of people not getting paid that they were missing out on, and those were like $420 million payments. So $420 million every 3 months. We were 6 months behind that. To date, I'm only behind by 1 categorical payment. So I paid 5 school categorical payments in a year, which is one more than a whole year's worth, right? In less than a year, in like the first 8 months of me being in office, because I really prioritized education funding, and I didn't think it was right that we prioritize high-priced consultants over sick people or children, right? So this is how the controller's office has changed since last December a year ago. And so it's an issue of prioritizing, but during very difficult cash flow times. And we're going to continue to be in this really bad situation, and I have to continue to think very conservatively when it comes to paying bills, because we're going into, again, for the 4th year now of a Bruce Rauner budget season, where on Valentine's Day, he's supposed to give his budget address, and all I want for Valentine's Day is a balanced budget proposal. Can you do that? That'll be my Valentine if we do that.
Susana, I'll bring you chocolates or bake you cookies or something.
I'm gonna need the kind with the liquor inside.
I can do that because you're not gonna get. I got 24 chocolate chip cookies that says he does not propose a balanced budget.
Really? Yeah, or a balanced budget. That's the thing. He's gonna present a budget. Okay, everybody mark my words. We should do like over/under bets. He's gonna present a budget, and we should have like bets on. Of course, but pretend, because it's not legal, but bets on by how many billions it's going to be out of balance, as he calls it, his balanced budget.
I'm also tracking the G drop, and he's up to 60% in his last
On the G drops.
All right, we're about out of time. I wanted to host privilege here, ask one more question, and ask all you guys to answer it in a succinct manner.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, which party in Illinois and nationally do you think is in better shape? And I ask that because the Republicans obviously control everything in Washington right now. We could sit here and debate and be hypothetical about what's going to happen in the governor's race here. Democrats control the legislature. But much as the Democrats frankly control the legislative remap process here, Republicans have been very shrewd in the majority of states controlling the remap process. So they have a decided advantage, it would seem. But demographics, we keep hearing are shifting Democrats' way. So enough of my interjecting. What do you guys think? Who is, and briefly say why? Democrats or Republicans, who's better positioned going forward and why?
I think the Republicans are in a better position. They have the presidency and they have control of the chambers, and it is what it is. But I also think it's good for us to kind of know the position that we don't want to be in, because it stinks to be in the minority. So from a long-term perspective, I think the Democrats are in a better position because we can grow into regaining power. Currently, right now, how can you argue that it stinks to be in the, it doesn't stink to be in the minority? We need to get out of it. And so this is a very expensive and humbling lesson that we had to learn with this last election cycle. But promising, Democrats. Right now, Republicans.
D's have the mo. I like having the mo. And I think that that's going to be, as each election cycle, that the key is getting more people to vote for the right candidates than the other person. And to date, post-Trump, it is the D's who've been doing that. And I think that it's going to be, that is going to continue, but we're going to have to make it continue, right? In Virginia, there's a House seat that's still not been decided because there was one vote that, it's a whole weird, scary thing that you probably guys would identify with, being in Chicago. So just the reality again.
It never comes down to one vote in Chicago.
I know. That every damn vote counts. Susana, 55 votes. the first time. So that for us, we have the mo, and we need, yes, they have the power, but, you know, people got the power.
That's right.
My race was 55 votes the first time, 55. But no lie, did you serve with Deb Graham?
No.
So Deborah Graham was a state rep before she became an alderman, I think, or it was the opposite. But
Yeah, no,
whatever.
you're right.
So I served with her when she was in the state house, and she won by a coin toss.
So did Rosemary Mulligan.
Oh, did she really?
Rosemary
so
Mulligan
it was
was a coin toss as well.
It was a totally tied race.
Yeah.
And she won in the courts by a coin toss. Isn't that crazy? So let's hope that the Democrat wins by a coin toss too.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, you know, yes, they have the seats, they have the power, but they have it because they have abandoned principle.
Well, this is true. Yeah. Well, we didn't say who's the more ethical.
Right.
That's clearly us. Yes.
But I will also say, as someone, I mean, I may be darn near the most liberal member of the General Assembly. I mean, Will Guzzardi and I arm wrestle regularly for the title. And believe it or not, I take him occasionally. He's spindly, exactly. And I'm not spindly at all. No, but I'm also, in many ways, the most bipartisan member. I've never passed a bill without Republican votes, and I've done that very consciously. And when I talk to my friends in the Republican Party, they lament the loss of their party. They are mourning the death of what they had adhered themselves to. And that's meaningful. That's meaningful long term. I don't know when it pays off for us, but I believe in playing the long game.
All right. On that note, we'll call it an evening. Yeah. Thanks so much. You guys are great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Susana and Candace. Thanks for your time. Thanks to all you guys for coming.
Can I remind everybody that both Kelly and I are up for re-election? And she does have an opponent. Do you still have that guy running against you?
I do.
This guy like posted. I'm gonna say. Let me do it.
Go for it.
Let me just please, because it's just so messed up. This guy posted a picture of a homeless guy's feet on a train and like made fun of it. Right? Talked about his stinky feet or something. Like, who does that? And definitely in your district, right? Like, it's so crazy. I don't even know the guy's name. It doesn't matter.
He's actually trying to run to my left, too, which is
So
kind of
crazy.
weird.
So like, let's make fun of a homeless guy, right? That's like the worst. Like, you win for worst human that day. So, she's awesome. We need to re-elect her. And if you don't mind, don't skip over my name too. Pick controller Susana Mendoza in the primary.
And
in
if
the
you've
general.
moved, you need to re-register. If you have moved since the last election, please make sure you find a human, go online, re-register so that you will be able to.
Yeah, that we can get behind. We're officially nonpartisan on this stage. I understand you guys making your plugs. We're officially nonpartisan. Anyway, thanks to all you guys for coming out in the cold and waiting a little longer. The discussion was awesome. Thanks to Chris for taping. Thanks to Tim and Katie, the Hideout, for having us. We'll see you guys next month.